back to the provincial budget, no increase on wildfire spending. Minister Salas says it's not as likely to be as bad as last year. Is that wishful thinking? To talk about that, we bring in Anabela Bonada, Managing Director of Climate Science for the Intact Center of Climate Adaptation. Anabela, thank you for doing this once again. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us once again on this. What do you make of that statement that the wildfire season is unlikely to be as bad as last year?
I think it's great to look at all the science and information that we have. So I do want to first, commend the minister for bringing this to attention, saying, there are $50 million going towards having more firefighters for wildfire, having a new station. That's good news. But I think it's not quite accurate to say that last year was an anomaly. It would be great if it were, wishful thinking. But from the information that we currently have, so just based on historical data, almost 18% of Manitobans are at very high risk of wildfire. And that's just based on the past, on the type of vegetation, on where Manitobans are located. If we include our climate projections to that number goes up. We don't have a number for that, but we do have a number for extended wildfire seasons. So our wildfire season is extending by about a week in the front end, a week in the back end, and the fire weather, which is what really helps drive those big wildfires that we see. We've had extreme wildfire weather over the last few years. So the chances of that going forward are actually quite high because we haven't really slowed down the impacts from climate change.
So that's why I wanted to have you on, is the data and the history of what we're looking at and the science behind it. What would you say is a fair prediction for next year? Understanding that predictions are what they are, but what would the science tell you?
Mm-hmm. So what we've seen for Canada for this past winter is that we're having a bit less snow than we usually have. The last 6 to 8 years, we've had drought across the country for many areas. Manitoba is part of that, of course. There's also a prediction that we could switch to El Nino by the middle of the summer. And if anybody remembers what that was like, 2024 was an El Nino year with 2023. And that's when we had extreme wildfire seasons a wildfire season for all of Canada. We had the most land burned in 2023. So it's hard to know exactly where it's going to hit yet. So I agree with that. It might not be 2026 that Manitoba sees another extreme wildfire season, but it doesn't mean it may not occur going forward because everything is trending for warmer weather. So we already know from Environment and Climate Change Canada that 2026 is expected to be another of our warmest years on record. And in part, it has to do with El Nino, but it also has to do with the trends that we've been watching from other parts of the world that experienced summer before us. Lots of wildfires in South America. There's currently a wildfire in parts of the U.S. because of the extreme heat and drought conditions that they're experiencing. And that's a little, it's a canary in the mine telling us that potentially is coming our way for this year.
So along those lines, Anabela, I think like what came out of last year and the horrific season we had here in Manitoba was like, here's some things that we probably should have been doing, haven't been doing, or budget-wise with doing. We get the statement, I get it, and it was such a bad wildfire season in our province last year that I can understand why it would be simple to go, well, that probably won't happen again. But what I'm wondering about is what we learned from last year and what you would take from where we were to prevent, maybe even if it is as bad as last year, or even worse potentially in a year or two, to prevent how it went last year for us.
Yeah, I can provide 3 points on that. So one of them is the cost of last year. So the cost of the wildfires between what it cost the province to suppress the wildfires and what it cost in insured losses was $600 million. And now, we're looking at the province spending just $50 million to offset those costs and, start protecting the communities from wildfire. The other point that I do want to make is that we've seen this before. So in BC, they had their worst wildfire season on record in 2017. And there was this feeling that, okay, that was an anomaly, just like this one for Manitoba. 2018, the year after, they had the next worst wildfire season. And then in 2021, it surpassed all the records. And then the province invested a lot of money into wildfire protection through FireSmart, through more firefighters, and they have a really robust program now. But it took 3 years of anomalies, as we're calling these. So I think the lessons come a little bit later. Provinces or areas need to be hit a few times to really learn what we need to do differently. And my third point is that there are lots of things that we can be doing right now. So I understand provinces have tight budgets. There are lots of deficits happening across the country. So focus on the easy wins. And my big suggestion here is to just give free information to residents, like infographics. We have one that's great, showing what you can do around your home to protect it from wildfire. And there are lots of simple steps that can be done over a weekend.
It must be frustrating to you at points where, it's never focused on until it's too late.
Absolutely. We see that with everything. So once a flood goes through or a wildfire goes through, then we shift our focus. And there's good reason for it. There's lots of stuff happening in the world that needs lots of attention, but this isn't going away, and it's costing us more money. So as I mentioned, these wildfires cost the province and insurance $600 million. If it occurs again, it's going to cost even more than that. So the prevention side, we know that for every dollar that we spend on prevention, it saves us 10 in the future. But that future outlook is what our governments tend to struggle with because they are focused on the right now.
Yeah, indeed. And I understand it too. Like, that's what I want to emphasize. When we were going through this last year, I understand that like when healthcare and other issues come up in a province, and wildfires haven't been that big of an issue for a couple of years, although always an issue, you kind of cut from those budgets, right? And then something like this happens. That's why I was a little surprised that, and I know they're putting some money into the infrastructure of it all and equipment. But that's what I was kind of looking for is out of sight, out of mind. Is that how you kind of read this budget with what they announced or didn't announce concerning wildfires?
I would think so, especially with the comment that this will likely not happen again. So it's, let's shift our focus back to other areas of the province that need funding. But I appreciate that you brought up healthcare because our healthcare systems are strained. And what do you think wildfire does? Wildfire smoke, it strains the system more. So it actually has an effect on other parts of the province or other systems that are costing money and that are costing taxpayer money if we don't deal with some of the main issues like the impacts of climate change, which have a direct effect on the increasing cost of other things like healthcare. So it's kind of like focusing on one problem without really focusing on the big problem that's leading to that one problem being bigger.
And that's what I kind of was taken aback by. Well, it won't be almost as bad, or likely won't be as bad as last year. And I get it, right? Like if you do the proper things prior to and it never happens, then people look at it and like, well, we're spending all this money on this and nothing ever happens. It's kind of that catch-22, which I would think somebody in your position is kind of, they make movies about frustrations like this when somebody's telling you the storm is coming or the fire is going to happen. And people are like, no, it won't until it does, right?
Yeah, that's what we struggle with all the time. We stay very positive because we know that message is very difficult to get through, which is you could do everything around your home to protect it because there was a wildfire last year and then you don't get another one. So you don't see what you've done to protect your community, or if the province does a lot to prevent the wildfires from reaching the community, then, people will say, well, why did we spend all that money? So it's difficult to get that message across and help them see it. And it is something that's frustrating because we do see the communities that have wildfire and that burn down. We see people losing their homes. We see many people being evacuated every year. Millions of people across the world dealing with wildfire smoke from Canada. So we need to do something. But like as you mentioned, it's very hard to get that mindset that prepare now so that you can prevent in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Anabela. It's always such a great conversation and the catch-22, and I think that resonates with our listeners as well. I appreciate you doing this and all you do. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me, Jim.